Let's go ahead and talk about this one.
Oh,
Florida State takes down number 8 Alabama inside Doak Campbell Stadium. I don't think anybody had this on their radar. You and I on this show right here took Alabama to cover the 13.5-point spread. How about the Noles? 31-17, the final score. What a statement for Mike Norvell, Tommy Castellanos and company to go out and win this football game and say, like, last year really was a blip on the radar, and we're here to play. And I just think that there's so much to unpack with this, between the things we have to talk about and how we have to look at Florida State now, and the things we have to talk about and how we have to look at the Crimson Tide now as well.
yes, because we mentioned in the ACC preview when talking about Florida State, like, if anybody can make it work with these ragtag group of transfers, it's got to be Mike Norvell, because we've seen it happen before at multiple different stops. But I could not have foreseen this. I mean, really, okay, am I impressed with Florida State? Absolutely. I think Tommy Castellanos talking all the talk and then walking all the walk is fantastic. I think that's awesome. You can't help but feel good for Florida State after the season they just had, and then now doing this to the team that left them out of the playoff 2 years ago. It's kind of revenge is a dish best served cold. But really, because Florida State, even now, like, you could say they're the third best team in the ACC. And we'll get into those other two teams at the top in a moment. But I could not stop thinking when watching this game just how far Alabama has fallen. It was less about Florida State, and I feel bad because Florida State played awesome. It was less about Florida State and more about Alabama. They looked soft. They looked slow. They looked undisciplined. They looked uninterested, and they looked unprepared. Wow. You could maybe say one of those things once a season about any team under Nick Saban. If all 5 of those things were ever true under Saban, you were dreaming. Like, they never looked that poor. And you're now in a situation where they're 5-5 in their last 10 games. They've lost 4 of those games, being double-digit favorites. One of them is a bowl game, so you can throw it out if you want to. But, like, Brian Williams and a lot of other guys were still playing in the game. I'm pretty sure Jalen Milroe played in that game. So looking at this game, there's a couple things that stand out to me. One, Thomas Castellanos on Florida State's first touchdown of this game kind of like wiggled his way to the sideline. And when he was starting to hit the edge, the Alabama linebacker in pursuit stopped running. And Castellanos saw that, dead-legged him, and accelerated to the end zone, final 5 yards for a touchdown. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, yeah, they're not winning this game, because you got to finish the play to the whistle. You don't want to get a penalty. I don't know if that's what he was scared of, but what are we doing when there's 3-4 yards of separation between the white line and the quarterback that you're not at least giving him a shove? You're just slowing down and not touching him. Florida State's linemen were pushing around Alabama's front line and their linebackers when they were getting to the second level.
Yep.
The corners looked slow. They were getting beat on a lot. I know I got to give a lot of credit to Gus Malzahn. He was doing so much of this pre-snap eye candy that he's kind of known for at this point to get these guys out of place. But again, this is Alabama we're talking about. Like it's such a fall from grace to see them look like this. I could not tell you a single game they played under Saban where I thought they looked this poorly coached. And now it's a trend dating back to last year. And I don't think Ty Simpson was awful. I think he just looked like a lot of other quarterbacks did this week making their first start, like CJ Carr with Notre Dame, who we'll get into later. I just think as a team, this is maybe the worst I've seen Alabama play since before Saban got there. And that's my biggest takeaway. It's like, what's next? Like, where do you go from here?
Can I make a seriously bold prediction about the state of Alabama football? My bold prediction, after seeing what you saw against Florida State, knowing the pressure that comes with that job, the expectation that comes with that job, the resources that are supplied in a place like Tuscaloosa to win football games, my bold prediction is that Kalen DeBoer does not make it to the Iron Bowl.
Wow.
And I know the first thing people are going to say, and it's the first thing that you'll probably say, is what about the buyout? And I just think we live in a modern era of collegiate athletics. You saw it with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. That's the biggest example. You saw it with Ed Orgeron at LSU.
Yeah.
Some donor, somebody out there is willing to cough up the coin to make a change, because Alabama football donors and fans in that community is crazy. And they do not take kindly, not only to losing. It's one thing if they lose the game. It's how they looked doing it. To your point, sloppy. It felt poorly coached at times, but more than anything, they just felt unprepared and physically beat. You can't lose like that. You go out there and you lose a slugfest, and it's a close game, and the quarterbacks are going at it, and you looked good doing it. Fine. Like you lose, and we're going to talk about it. You lose like Notre Dame lost to Miami. Fine. But Alabama got bullied, plain and simple, physically and mentally in that game. And that's my hot take. I think Kalen DeBoer does not make it to the Iron Bowl, because it's probably, and I understand it was, to give him devil's advocate, it was the biggest shoes in the history of college football to ever fill.
Yes, but you don't expect the drop-off to be this bad.
That, and on top of it, it makes the leash that much shorter, because of where the expectation level is at. And there's also no excuse, because on paper, this is one of the most talented teams in the entire country. Like on paper, no question, it has to be a top 5 most talented team at position by position. So there's really no excuse for it.
They have not played a game in the 14 under DeBoer. I stole this, the only stat from Josh Pate. They've not played a game under Kalen DeBoer where they had less penalties than the other team.
That's right. I saw that.
That is absurd. This is Alabama football. And again, the undisciplined part, right? They had like 8 penalties for 70-something yards. Like, when did a Nick Saban team ever have 8 penalties in a game? When did they ever look like they did against Oklahoma last year? Look like they did against Vanderbilt last year? A Saban team would have never allowed Georgia back in that ball game last year. And they would have never in a billion years looked like they did against Florida State. Think about what they did to USC in 2016. Think about what they did to Florida State in 2017. Think about what they did to Louisville in 2018. Like, could Florida State be a contender in the ACC? Absolutely. But I don't think they're that good to make Alabama look that bad. I could be wrong, right? Maybe both of these teams are good, and Florida State's just a buzzsaw. Like we kind of had this idea of
they got what the Florida State
was. 100%. And this kind of reminds me of when they beat LSU in Orlando back in 2023. And that was the first win of 13 in a row before they got smoked by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. But to your point about DeBoer, like, they go to Georgia. They have to play Tennessee. They have to play South Carolina, which is a game I already had them losing. They have to play LSU, and they have to play Oklahoma, who could be stingy, before getting to the Iron Bowl, to your point. So a midseason firing would be unprecedented, but how many of those games are they going to win?
I know.
It's nothing's a given anymore.
No. I do want to take a moment and talk about Florida State. I think I'm higher on Florida State, and you have to try and temper yourself as far as being reactionary after week 1. But I am all of a sudden all in on Florida State. And the reason I am is because there's still talent and bodies across from you in this game. You're still looking at 5-star athletes on the other side for Alabama. I just said they're one of the most talented teams in the country. And Florida State looked awesome. Tommy Castellanos looked the part. Like, he was one of the best quarterbacks of the weekend in a pretty weak quarterback weekend, all things considered, right? We talked about it being a pretty defensive weekend all around. I think we need to seriously have a conversation about Florida State contending for the ACC. No question about it. Now, Miami looked really good. Georgia Tech, they went to Boulder and won, and I think we're going to mention that game at the end a little bit. I wasn't super impressed in watching them do it. Like, they won the game. And sometimes that's the hardest thing. It's week 1. It's on the road. Boulder was a zoo. It was an awesome atmosphere, a night game. So, like, sometimes you just want to go there and win no matter what. So I don't want to take too much away from Georgia Tech. Louisville, we haven't seen them play a good team yet. I think Louisville's legit, but it's almost like this is so good for the ACC because everybody that we thought was going to be good looked pretty darn good. In
Mhm.
fact, I think Miami looked even better than we thought Miami was going to look. Maybe
100%.
Clemson not as good as we were hoping they were going to look, but it's week 1. And you just essentially added another team to the mix. Beautiful situation to have if you're the ACC.
I agree. I kind of walk away with 3 main takeaways, which is kind of like the 3 marks that had to be hit that we talked about if Florida State was going to be an improved team, not just a great team, right? Nobody had this high of an expectation, but if they were to be, a 7 or 8 win team, Castellanos has to look the part. He's got a lot of Jordan Travis in him, man. I think the marriage between him and Malzahn is going to be really exciting to watch, and I think Norvell really likes him.
And you could
I think
say a lot of the same things about Gus that we're saying about Matt Patricia.
right. We have recency bias against them because of how things ended at their previous stops or their last few stops. But the fact of the matter is, in a situation where there's not that much pressure on you, these guys are able to thrive. And I think Malzahn's going to have a good year. If he's going to do that against an Alabama defense, I would hate to see what they have to do when the ACC schedule rolls around. 2, those new receiver additions are legit. And Malzahn is getting them involved in so many different ways that is making them more than just downfield threats. Like anybody can get the ball on any play and you have to stop them. And then 3, they just looked big. Like they are pushing guys around defensively up front. The offensive line is doing their thing. They're, again, getting them involved. A lot of pull concepts. The zone concepts were working really well. And when Castellanos has these designed runs, most of the time they are getting good chunks of yardage. So quarterback, check. Receivers, check. Trenches, check. That's all you need to win in this conference. And I think they're going to be able to do it.
I circle this one as the most fascinating game of the weekend. Florida State taking down Alabama, looking really good doing it down in Tallahassee.